Now it's my pleasure to introduce Zach Savich. Zach is the author of 9 books of poetry and prose, including a memoir about cancer, teaching, and poetic friendship called Diving Makes the Water Deep, published by Rescue Press in 2016, and the poetry collection Momently, which is just out from Black Ocean. Of Momently, the Boston Globe writes, Savich moves between the vastness and the right here, from a hamburger in the parking lot to the circumstantial soul, and in doing so, we're placed in the both at once as well, reminded of the grace and nothingness of the regular. Many of Zach's books, including Momently, are available at Prairie Lights. You can see the covers of a few of them on the screen behind me, so definitely go check those out after the lecture. Zach holds an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop, and his work has received the Iowa Poetry Prize, the Colorado Prize for Poetry, the Cleveland State University Poetry Center's Open Book Award, and Omnidawn's Chapbook Prize. He has worked as an editor and manuscript consultant on many projects and is currently co-editor of Rescue Press's Open Prose series. Originally from the Pacific Northwest, Zach holds MFAs from the Iowa Writers Workshop and the MFA program for poets and writers at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He has taught creative writing and literature in New Zealand, Rome, Massachusetts, and for many years at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. Zach currently teaches at the Cleveland Institute of Art, where he is chair of liberal arts. He has also worked extensively in community settings, including the Iowa Summer Writing Festival. Zach has taught for both the festival on campus and online. Just this spring, he taught the 5-week online workshop, Writing Your Book and Preparing for Publication. And this week, he's teaching on campus the week-long workshop, Finding Your Voices, Helping Your Writing Talk and Listen. We're so grateful to have Zach here presenting the lecture, Ditties and Frolics and Aches, Poetry and Song, which is for anyone who wants to tune into the music of their writing, whether poetry or prose or song lyrics, and learn how to let it sing. Please welcome Zach Savich.
What I like from a session like this is to leave with like 12 new ideas that I might pick up later. So I'm going to try to give that. I'm also going to try to give a sense of some big, fundamental baseline ideas that I hope are like the major flora and fauna, the major food groups that you can come back to, whatever you're working on in your writing, whatever you're writing, it will come back later. That's what I love about a week like this. It's an intensive plunge. Then we get things to chew on for the rest of the year. My plan is to be kind of interactive, kind of collaborative. So, I don't know, get ready. And I'll share some things for about 30-ish minutes, and then we'll stop, and we can take the conversation wherever you'd like it to go. Great. Welcome. Good morning. Thanks for being here. To start, though, I want to start with a clip. A patron saint of poets and writers is, of course, Charlie Chaplin. I want to show this clip from Modern Times, the 1936 film. Chaplin's about to sing. To set this up, you might remember that Chaplin is trying to make it in the hard city. He has just failed as a waiter, as a server, in a wonderful scene you might remember where he's holding a tray above his head and possibly spinning through the crowds. He fails as a waiter, and in this world, if you fail as a waiter, the restaurant might hire you as a singer, which is a pretty good outcome, and says something maybe about the song tradition or what poets are, the bardic tradition. I failed as a server, let me sing you a song. And what's notable about this also, this is the first time, well, I'll say more about this in a second. Let me just play the clip. He's just about to go on stage.
giusto d'ore, je notre soccofore, je notre citavore, je la tula tila toi.
He can't remember the words, so he has the words written on his cuffs. And you see that moment where he does this. He's planning to crib the words off his cuffs. He does this, and the cuffs shoot off. And then he has no words. And then so he goes around, he's looking for them places. She says from the wings, sing, never mind the words. I love so much about this, right? I love being thrown onto stage. Here I am, gotta say something. I love how she points to her mouth so much. It's like singing is like this. She's saying, this is it, do this. I love the cuffs with the lyrics on them. And it reminds me of the book form of a kind of, Nikki or others can correct me, I believe a medieval French book form that was called a papillon, like a butterfly, that someone's nodding, I'm not making this up, good, that was a butterfly tossed. You know, here's a butterfly, here's my pamphlet, here's my book. I love that gesture is in Chaplin's lyrics shooting off. And then what he sings is nonsense, but it's sophisticated melodic nonsense. I imagine covering this nonsense. What's beautiful here also, some of you might know more about this from film history, this is the first time that his voice appeared in a film. What's interesting about that is that it's not the first time, it's not the first time speech appears in films. He preferred making silent film after the point where he could have talking. And that's interesting. I think it has to do with moments like this, how gesture can work and give a sense of the audible just through image. You know, you don't have the audio to lean on, so you have to do things. If a drum is loud, you have to show something shaking so people know what the volume was. We could go on, but I want this in the background. This sense of song is something that helps you find the words. You might not have the words, but it's a way of finding the words. And that might be the key to a big difference that we'll focus on about what is speak, what is song, what is saying, what is singing. And I think in song often you might find yourself humming a melody before you have the words, and the words emerge. And this is mysterious, but it's also what locates us, right? And it feels like it's key to what we know of being human. It's key to what we know of all of literature, of whatever we're doing in writing is in relation to that, even if you're just on the page. Okay, goals for today, explore some ideas, throw some butterflies off there, shoot my cuffs into the wind, get some inspiration. I hope you leave with some things you want to try, and then work together. We writers, especially, I think we learn by doing, not by knowing, so I'll give some opportunities for us to try some things out. Here's the plan: roots, part 2, limits, part 3, weird singer or something else, part 4, some time to chat. First, though, let's think about origins. This is a 2-line poem by W.S. Merwin called The First Composer. The first composer could hear only what he could write. What do you think of that? Is that a blessing or a curse? Right? On one hand, it's a vision of ultimate freedom. You can do anything. You're not constrained by the received, song, hymnal forms. On the other hand, you can only hear yourself. I'd be curious. Well, I'll leave that question there, and we could think about this. Is this a type of freedom that you would seek as a writer? Do you seek moments early in the morning when you're writing, trying to find your way to the feeling of being the first composer? Or are you a writer who has a sense of a choral tradition? You're writing among others. You're finding your range. Origin 2, Cadman's hymn. Here's the story. A cowherd in the 7th century is at a feast. People are sharing some songs. He has no song. He can't sing. Might remind you of the Chaplin moment, this moment of having no song. He goes to sleep in a funk and in some gunk. I think he's in a stable. He dreams a song. He wakes up singing. And this is a kind of moment that you see throughout different literatures and traditions of where things come from. And you might have this yourself sometime. That, isn't it wonderful when you dream that you're reading, or when you dream that you're hearing a phrase, and you can remember maybe the shape of the sentence, even if you can't remember the sentence. But maybe you can kind of see the shape. Maybe you can fill that shape in. If we put these two origins together, the first composer could hear only what he could write is a vision of total isolation, total self-sufficiency, whichever way you want to see it. But here we get a sense that what singers have is also coming from elsewhere. And that's a very common feeling. It's common enough to be dependable that the elsewhere can come. And it's also, as I said, I think I'm fascinated by how that locates us. Something that comes from elsewhere, that comes mysteriously, also is what anchors us. And you might find yourself suddenly, I'd be curious to hear about this later, breaking into song at moments of extremity, in moments of grief, in moments of love, whatever, that you might find a sort of melody that's working its way toward words. Part 1, roots. Let's try this. We'll see how it feels in the group. We'll see how the group's feeling about it. I'm curious about your experiences. Could we just take a few minutes, just for yourself, in a notebook, in a phone, whatever, to think about either of these? The first question, your previous experience with song. I love this because it's so basic. Song is everywhere. It's in the supermarket. It's in the car. It's in our heads. It's in the radio. But asking the big basic question, asking the obvious question, seems like a gift that writers can do. I'd be curious about this. Where does your mind go this morning in relation to this first bullet point? Do you sing? Did you? When? Where? What? And/or this second bullet point. I'm assuming most people in here are writers, are pursuing writing. Some might also be musicians and singers. If you could sing like the best singer in the world, would you still write what you write? Would you still write poems, fiction, nonfiction, if you could break our hearts just by saying baby, just by saying la? If you could la, if that wasn't sufficient, would you still write, and why? And we'll just take 3-ish minutes to gather some thoughts wherever your mind goes this morning about previous experiences or this kind of thought experiment question. Thanks for jumping in with this. I'm tempted to just leave the room and let you talk. That would work. That'd be one way to do this session. I hope you'll keep talking after this. The conversations will continue. Nora has a microphone.
It's really cool. You could talk into it like this.
And you can also throw it like Chaplin would throw anything. I'd love to take a minute now just to hear some quick thoughts, maybe focused especially on the second question. If we had more time, let's chat after about the first. I'm very curious about this. But the second question, I think, gets at the heart of what is the instinct or the motive behind speaking, behind writing, behind singing. What leads you distinctly to each form? Does anyone have some thoughts about this second question? If you could break our heart just by saying la, would you still write creatively? And why or why not? Yeah, thanks.
Hi, I could not break your heart by singing law, but even if I could, what creative writing does for me, and the reason I love it and the reason I continue to do it, is it surprises me and I find out things about myself I didn't know before and about other people. And I like the tribe. So there's just so many things about it. I could not possibly give it up even if I were the best singer in the world.
Uh-huh. Other thoughts about that? Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Laura. I love writing, and I've written all my life, but I also love singing. And I was a vocal music major in college with the hopes of becoming a vocal music teacher. But my dream was, I'd be a singer, So if I could wow you with singing, like, whatever. But I would still write, and I would write my own songs. And I just love writing so much. So
for you, what does writing do that might be different from just singing or just singing other songs?
I guess I like the freedom to just, go. I sing every single day. Like, I sing goofy songs to my dog all the time that I'm making up. I'm like Weird Al, and I do like the parodies, and I'm singing to my little dog about what he's doing or what I think of him or whatever. So I just think it's like the creative process, and just, I don't know, I love it so much. And I feel like the two are really linked.
Yeah.
The music and the song and the writing.
It's fascinating to think of the word freedom or the relative freedom in each approach, because on one hand you might think, well, if you're writing, you're bound often to the semantic meaning of things, of content. La isn't just pure tone, isn't pure sound, right? La becomes ladybug. La needs to find its anchor. Even if you're pursuing a certain sound, it often is finding its anchor in a semantic meaning. But then to feel that as a greater freedom is really fascinating.
Yeah.
A few other thoughts. Thanks.
So for me, I think of singing more as an act of interpretation, and I think of writing as more of an act of creation. Of course, there's some level of creation in singing too. I used to sing. Now I'm old and I mostly just croak. But even if I could still sing, what interests me is going into that mysterious place where, for me, both songs, because I do compose as well, both songs and fiction and poetry come from. Writing for others to sing does give me pleasure. Writing choral music that becomes a gathering place where a group comes together and interprets my work gives me the most pleasure.
Thank you. Maybe just one more, then we'll over here.
Well, for me, singing's the ethereal moment. Writing is the leaving something behind, which may have to do with my age.
Awesome. And Margaret, I saw Margaret with a hand also. I'm really curious what you're thinking.
If I could sing like the best singer in the world, I don't think I would write anymore, because I would have a different brain. And so to me, the best singer in the world that I know of is Mike Patton. And what he does with vocalizations is the same thing as writing, but it's sideways and it's pre-language. So I think I would focus on that.
Yeah. Oh, I wish we had 15 weeks to get into all of this more. Thanks so much, Nora. One thought in relation to these responses I was having about the desired effect of either art is the desire to leave something behind, as you said, that could be found by others. Is the singing impulse one that is beautifully, right? It's embodied, it's about expression, it's about being in time in a different way. Whereas writing you can leave behind. I was thinking about the desired effect of each. Is the desire, when I posit this singer la, and then we're blissed out forever, is that a focus on achieving a feeling rather than conveying a message? And I think in creative writing, we're often trying to convey a message and a feeling together, right? We're not just trying to give the meaning like we would in a newspaper or a letter to the editor. We're trying to create a feeling or an aura or a harmonic that might emerge. Great. Let's think about this a little bit more. I love this idea. This comes from the objectivist poet Louis Zukofsky's lyrical epic, A. He says this, an integral, he thinks about music a lot. He's thinking about poetry's connections to music. An integral, lower limit speech, upper limit music. I love thinking about this as like the thing you hit with the big mallet at the carnival, right? And the weight goes up and rings a bell. Lower limit speech, upper limit music. You might think in your own writing, do you tend more toward the music or more toward the speech? In your own writing, when you're writing moments that matter the most, moments of conflict, moments of tension, moments of discovery, do you try to wade into those waters through speech? I'm really going to say something, I'm going to be logical, I'm going to pronounce it, I'm going to declare it, or through singing. And proceeding through singing can sound like proceeding through stammering you can stammer your way towards song, right? You start to find the stammer becomes rhythmic and starts to get some melody, something you can repeat. It's a way of projecting forward. I think of this sometimes, here's the spectrum. La la, that's the music. Mama, there's some speech. But he calls it an integral. And an integral means it's integrated, right? They're happening together. So it might be better to look at it this way. Also, it's really nice. I work in an art school, and so I'm always laboring to have slides that are visually appealing to students of art and design. Thank you for being writers who let me follow my heart and have slides that are just text. I've changed mama, which is that's pretty close to sound, right? That's an emerging utterance, to mother, trying to get away from the infant towards speech. La, la, la. I'd be curious, you could think to yourself, the middle zone, those 4 lines, we feel each of those differently as a type of language, as a type of song. La, la, la is pure song, then what's the difference do you hear between la, mother, la, or la, mother, 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 la, mother, la, mother? Like, you start to hear some registers in there. One thing this might be doing, we're seeing song in this mixed zone. The la is a burst that might just be sonic. It might feel opaque in terms of its meaning outside of the play of sound. Could you add that into your writing, and what would it do if so? If you have some writing that's really clear, that's really lucid, declarative, close to speech, could you add one drop of song, one moment, make one word, not the word meant for semantic meaning, but for rupture, for sonic rupture. Kind of like if your prose is petting a dog, just smoothing the hair one way, is there one spot where you could just pet against the grain of the hair? We're going to spend a few minutes with this. I think this is the big fundament of thinking about ear. If one goal today is just kind of wake our ears up for whatever you're writing, and to think about how that can lead to song. We could go on about meter, rhythm, prosody, cadence, and so on, but I think it often comes down to this. Does something sound more like speech or more like song? And that's at the heart of so much poetics. So let's try it. This is like at the optometrist, you're trying to test our ears, I guess. Well, the optometrist for the ears. This poem is concerned with language on a very plain level. Look at it talking to you. You look out a window or pretend to fidget. You have it, but you don't have it. I offer this as something that sounds like speech, and that is it taking pains to tell us that it's sounding like speech. This poem is concerned with language on a very plain level. We'll discuss some of these more, but you could think to yourself, what does this do to establish itself as speech rather than song? One is through this explanatory tone. It's just telling me this is what I'm doing. Another might be let's look at some other samples. What would you say about something like this? Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. It's in longish lines, which we often think of more like speech. We think of Shakespeare in terms of monologues and performance, right? People speechifying. This is a sonnet, though, and it also has these rhymes, day and May, temperate date. Is that enough to push it towards song? Just long lines might tend us towards speech generally. Is adding rhyme enough to register song? Or maybe it's just a hint, a tinge of song. Is the topic, is the theme, is this more of a song-like theme compared to this Ashbery, which is taking pains to be very plain and straightforward? Here's Adrienne Rafel, who I'm sure you can find her books at Prairie Lights, a wonderful, wonderful poet who really plays with patterns of ballad, nursery rhyme, riddle, just a delightful, delightful poet. Listless little Lena, looping long along, lisping, lilting Thumbelina, making up this song. Okay, does this, song, yes, speech, song, yes. I need like a paddle in each hand. Is this speech or is this song? In this one, we see shorter lines, which invites us to think about rhythm, really closely, right? We feel the line ending, so we can feel that as a unit. We see all this alliteration. We see a playfulness. Right before you think about what this means, your toe could be tapping to it. You have a sense of its mood. Maybe that's a quality of music, something that communicates before it's understood, that we hear the mood or the emotion, or if we feel the gesture more than before we're thinking about the meaning. This first sentence is asking us to think about the meaning absolutely. Here, we're in the play of it. Listless little Lena looping long along, lisping, lilting Thumbelina, making up this song. We might ask if to write towards song, if that's something that you're interested in, does it require risking nonsense or getting near what might be considered nonsense because you're privileging something other than clear sense, as a philosopher or a journalist would use? You also see making up this song. A reference to song itself helps tilt the needle in that compass from speech towards song. People have played with this in really interesting ways. Title any poem song, and then you can do what you want, and people will read it in relation to singing, to musicality. You could experiment with how far you could stretch that. What happens if you call a passage of prose song and then resist any musical elements? What would the effect of that be? Do we hear that as a frustrated song or a plain song? I want to show some samples that are short lines, have things that look like song, but also things that might not. Here's a little Theodore Roethke. A deep dish, lumps in it. I can't taste my mother. Who? I know the spoon. Sit in my mouth. I love this era of his work. It's full of such delight, such play. Like these lines from Rayful, we see some tending toward nonsense. We see short lines. Here we have the rhyme too, a long song, really hitting the gong of the ong. In Roethke, does this sound like song to you? It has short lines. It has playfulness. We don't have rhyme exactly. Mouth and mother kind of rhyme, kind of don't rhyme. Who and spoon. We have very little context for how that who should sound. There are other songs where you come across a tra-la and you know the exact mood of it. A performer could read that who with many different tones. So maybe we feel it as an invitation toward thinking toward all the ways it could go. What happens when you're just reading on the page? Just in if we're encountering language as language, or if we imagine this performed through just like I feed it through a dictation software and the computer reads it back to me in a flat voice, would I still feel an undertow of song? I think you would with this, even read in a way that tries to resist all melodic meaning. On the other hand, imagine giving this to a singer. You could and say, sing this. And they could, but they would probably need to import or embed types of rhythm. They would emphasize words we might not normally emphasize when saying it. Excellent. So here's another one. I love another. Just go to Prairie Lights, get all the books. Some have chimes, 3 long things as you come in. They smile and give you lettuce because you've brought your violin. Niedecker is often writing in relation to nursery rhyme, but in kind of doing it just enough so you feel it, and then altering the rhythm in a really interesting way. I think this is lovely. It's beautiful, right? It's written toward a child who you can tell has a violin. All right, short lines. We have continuity. It shifts toward a sense of song for me with the in and violin. When violin comes in, I hear the resonance with as you come in. It references music, like Rayful's poem does also. Some have chimes. And I think that's just lovely on its own. Some have chimes. It feels both very precise and like the image is coming into view for her as she writes. It's not giving me an already known thing. It's giving me a feeling of perception. 3 long things as you come in. You put this image together in your mind, right? These 3 long chimes. As you come in, I see it. I know this is wrong, but it invites me to see it like a curtain that someone's passing through these chimes, this threshold of music. They smile and give you lettuce. Isn't that tender? Isn't that just like beautifully gentle? They smile and give you lettuce. You get a sense of this whole world, who these people are. I picture some neighbors, I picture a garden. Because you've brought your violin. So tender, you've caused this. Anyway, in terms of music, I hear this as kind of speech. They smile and give you lettuce is a pretty plain kind of phrase. But then that violin, the in violin chime, is enough to shift the register to me. So why is this relevant? You could think of a soft touch can be enough. If you have one, say you're writing a poem, and there's nothing happening with rhyme, but you have one stanza that really sounds like a traditional ballad, that's going to wake up the ear to the world of ballad. Say you're writing prose, and you suddenly have a character start to speak a little more rhythmically. You don't need to do that for the full page. You don't need a full chapter. Just a blip of that will activate the ear and bring in the meanings of music. The ghosts swarm. They speak as one person. Each loves you. Each has left something undone. Won't talk about just throwing some others out here. Here you see some rhyme, one undone, kind of similar to this. Might be similar to this one too, though, because of how it's moving in units, a unit of thought. Here's Russell Atkins, Cleveland poet and composer. This is an interesting one. It seems to reference song. You see this like S-O-N-G. It's inviting the ear in. It's involving the ear. But how would you sing it? I think you could. I think a singer could very easily give an interpretation of this, a performance, but it's also very much happening through the eye. There's an overtone that emerges from this piece for me. I'm curious what you all see. The L, but then I put that together into the long. I put this together into lone. I put this together in a song. But an overtone that emerges for me is the word gone. I start to hear the long gone place. Those words don't appear, but they kind of float out. I'm going to go throw some confetti, some more butterflies out there, shoot my cuffs, and just share a couple more ideas, then we can chat. So back to Bruce's point about how nearly anything could be sung. Right? And so what would make things unsingable? And I think here of the Irish poet W.B. Yeats, who at one point in the 30s wrote some marching songs for a political faction that he then grew disenchanted of. And so then Yeats got his songs back and revised them to make them unsingable. And I love thinking of all his years of tinkering, his well-tuned ear, writing these songs and then revising them to be unsingable. That's a beautiful thought. If we had time, I was going to invite you to do this. What do you do to make a song unsingable? How could you frustrate it? How could you ruin it? What would you do? Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony. You start to already hear it spell out. Stuck a feather in his cap and called it, I don't know, a noodle? What's the smallest change you could make to wreck a passage like this, to make it unsingable? Invitations for later. We could try this also. What do you do to make speech seem like song? Could you take a passage of ordinary speech? What would you do to shift it? Would you import rhythm, rhyme, refrain? This is now just the flyby overview. I want to make sure there's time to chat. I was going to end here. I will end here. Passage from Walt Whitman, from a poem called Song of the Answerer. Another one that uses that word, song, to signal that the speech that's happening might be a different kind of speech. I love this passage. The singers of successive hours of centuries may have ostensible names, but the name of each of them is one of the singers. The name of each is eye singer, ear singer, head singer, sweet singer, night singer, parlor singer, love singer, weird singer, or something else. I love the or something else. I'm not going to say all of them. There's more that we could go to. Which are you? Which is your writing? We're talking about voice a lot in our workshop this week. Does your voice tend toward one of these? Are you singing in relation to the eye? Are you singing in relation to the head? Are you a sweet singer or a night singer? If you find yourself tending really strongly toward one, could you get a flavor from another? And what's the weird singer? I'd love to see some weird, just the weird songs, where you take that. Maybe it has to do with songs that become unsingable, but we still feel the tug. All right, let me wrap up there with the invitation for us all to chat more. It's just Tuesday. We have a lot of time left this week. I'm especially happy if someone wants, you were coming hoping for some prosody, some things about like meter and song and traditional forms. Let's talk. That's something that's pretty easy to chat through if you want to at some point. I hope today we foregrounded first this big distinction, speech or song, and what makes one thing sound like one or the other, and how that can be present in your work. Let me open it up now for a minute for a few questions or anything you all would like to share. Thoughts from that writing we did earlier that you didn't get to share. Anything else? What's on your minds? And Nora has our fun, that is a microphone.
Yes, it is.
Any thoughts, questions, things you want to bring up?
I think of being a child and learning a word, and then for some reason the poor parents have to listen to that word for days and days and days. Yes. And what I recall is that sometimes it wasn't the word's meaning that the child wanted as much as they just loved it on the ear. And then I guess that's just what can happen in the brain sometimes, and maybe we need to use our brain a little more like that.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think of that, the Chaplin clip that we started with, that sense of what is nonsense, but also so expressive. In my workshop today, we're going to talk about the idea that you can get most of the meaning if you hear something halfway through a wall. You don't need to know the exact words. Anyway, thank you for that. Yes.
So I'm really struck by I Singer, and I think more and more modern poetry, which I think poetry is closer to song than most prose, but so much is now written for the page, and we sit alone and read it, which turns it into a more spatial art form. And also because if you have line breaks but not a full stop, your brain is trying to do two things, both leave space and continue, which is a lot of multitasking for most of our brains and makes it more cerebral. And I really think part of what makes something song is that it becomes a temporal art form. And I think we've lost so much when we don't have a lot of readings and when we don't read aloud to ourselves and to others.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And there's a way that you can't skim when you're listening. You have to hear, you can turn up the speed, but otherwise you have to hear all of it. And connecting that to the last comment, I'd be curious for anyone, what are the words that you're happy to just sit with, to repeat, or that might come to you against, either the phrases that come to you throughout a day that you stay with each word of. I think that's fascinating. And how could you write, if you are writing for the page, as we do, in a way that brings time in or invites time? Some people do it through just overt repetition. I think of the poet John Taggart, who will sometimes repeat the same line many, many times within slight permutations. And he's asking you to read the line word by word each time through. You need to be with it. Anyway, any other thoughts? This is fascinating.
This is just a tiny thought about physically what singing you might not be making a noise with your voice, but what is rhythm that opens up writing, such as taking walks. For me, riding a bicycle, I think those are forms of singing, and I think they can pull you out of your head and more into your physical body, and then your physical body will start to write words.
I love that. And it makes me want to go, we need to have the calisthenics poetry workshop where we do a lot of gestures and we see, what words start to come after we do this long enough. It suggests that speech is almost is like sweat or something, is a physical expression of movement. The breath changes, right? So you could, that's wonderful. That seems like, Margaret, I think that's a beautiful idea to end on today. Thank you so much for taking time to be here and think about poetry and song. Here's my email if folks want to stay in touch or chat about any of this more. I'll be at all the events this week. So thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Zach, for giving us so much to think about and work with in our writing this week. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We're going to be back tomorrow with Alina Grabowski for the 11th Hour Lecture Series, and Alina is also giving a reading tonight at Prairie Lights. So hope to see you at one or more of those events, and have a great lunch.